The First World War was a global conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality. It raged from 1914 to 1918, leaving millions dead and forever changing history. The seeds of the First World War were sown in the decades leading up to 1914. A complex web of factors contributed to the outbreak of hostilities. Among the most significant were the forces of nationalism, militarism, and a tangled system of alliances. Nationalism, the fervent belief in one's own nation and its superiority, was on the rise in Europe. Countries sought to assert their dominance and expand their territories. This led to competition and rivalry among the great powers. Militarism fueled an arms race, with nations building up their armies and navies at an alarming rate. Each power believed that military strength was the key to security and influence. To protect their interests and deter aggression, nations formed a complex network of alliances. These alliances bound countries together in a web of mutual defense pacts. What was intended as a deterrent to war would become a catalyst for its outbreak. The spark that ignited the First World War came on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo. Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. This act of violence set in motion a chain reaction that plunged Europe into war. Austria-Hungary, enraged by the assassination, issued an ultimatum to Serbia. The ultimatum contained demands that Serbia could not accept without compromising its sovereignty. Serbia's refusal to meet all the demands led Austria-Hungary to declare war on July 28, 1914. The alliance system then came into play, dragging other nations into the conflict. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia, which was allied with Serbia. Germany also declared war on France, allied with Russia. Great Britain, obligated to defend Belgium's neutrality, declared war on Germany when German troops crossed into Belgium on their way to France. Within a matter of days, the great powers of Europe were at war. The world watched in disbelief as a localized conflict escalated into a global conflagration. The Western Front, a line of battle stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland, became synonymous with the horrors of trench warfare. Millions of soldiers faced each other across a desolate landscape of mud, barbed wire, and shell craters. Life in the trenches was a nightmare. Soldiers endured constant shelling, machine gun fire, and the threat of sniper attacks. Disease was rampant, and the lack of sanitation and proper medical care resulted in countless deaths. Attacks were often futile and resulted in heavy casualties. Soldiers went over the top, charging across no man's land into a hail of enemy fire, only to be mowed down. Key battles on the Western Front, such as the Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun, became symbols of the war's brutality and futility. The Western Front was a meat grinder, consuming the lives of millions of young men in a seemingly endless war of attrition. The stalemate on the Western Front lasted for years, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Section 5. A different kind of war, the Eastern Front. While the Western Front was characterized by trench warfare and stalemate, the Eastern Front was marked by greater fluidity and mobility. The vast distances and harsh conditions of Eastern Europe made trench warfare less practical. The Eastern Front saw massive battles involving millions of soldiers. The scale of the fighting was staggering and the casualties were enormous. Russia, with its vast manpower reserves, played a key role on the Eastern Front. However, the Russian army was poorly equipped and led, and it suffered heavy losses. Germany and Austria-Hungary faced a formidable opponent in Russia, but they also had to contend with internal unrest and political instability. The Eastern Front was a theatre of war marked by brutality, hardship, and immense loss of life. The fighting on the Eastern Front had a profound impact on the course of the war and the fate of the Russian Empire. Section 6. A world at war beyond Europe. While the fighting raged in Europe, the First World War was a global conflict, drawing in nations from around the world. The Ottoman Empire, allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, became embroiled in the war. The Ottoman Empire's strategic location, controlling access to the Black Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, made it a valuable ally for the Central Powers. The war spread to the Middle East, where British and Ottoman forces clashed in the deserts of Mesopotamia and the Sinai Peninsula. Japan, allied with Great Britain, seized German colonies in China and the Pacific. The colonies of European powers were also drawn into the conflict, providing troops and resources for the war effort. The First World War was truly a world war, with fighting taking place on multiple continents and involving nations from across the globe. Section 7. Across the Atlantic, the United States enters the fray. The United States, initially neutral, entered the First World War on the side of the Allies in 1917. Several factors contributed to the US decision to join the war. German submarine warfare, which had resulted in the sinking of American merchant ships, outraged public opinion in the United States. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, which resulted in the deaths of over 100 American citizens, further inflamed anti-German sentiment. The Zimmermann telegram, a secret German diplomatic cable intercepted by British intelligence, proposed a German alliance with Mexico against the United States. This revelation further fueled American anger and strengthened the hand of those who favored war. The US entry into the war proved to be a turning point. The arrival of fresh American troops and supplies provided a much-needed boost to the Allied war effort. The United States' industrial might and vast resources tipped the balance of power in favor of the Allies. Section 8. Armistice, the guns fall silent. By 1918, after more than 4 years of devastating warfare, the Central Powers were on the verge of collapse. Germany, facing internal unrest and dwindling resources, could no longer sustain the war effort. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, beset by ethnic tensions and military defeats, was on the brink of disintegration. On November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., an armistice agreement between Germany and the Allies went into effect. The guns fell silent, bringing an end to the hostilities. The world rejoiced at the news of peace, but the cost of victory was staggering. Millions lay dead, and Europe was in ruins. Section 9. Scars of War. The Treaty and its Aftermath. The Paris Peace Conference, convened in 1919, was tasked with negotiating peace treaties with the defeated Central Powers. The Treaty of Versailles, imposed on Germany, was particularly harsh. Germany was forced to accept responsibility for the war and pay heavy reparations to the victors. The treaty also stripped Germany of its colonies and imposed strict limits on its military. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, is often seen as having sown the seeds of future conflict. The harsh terms imposed on Germany created resentment and instability in the defeated nation. The war also led to the redrawing of the map of Europe, with the creation of new nations and the collapse of empires. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman and Russian empires all crumbled under the weight of the war. Section 10. Remembering the Great War Legacy and Lessons. The First World War was a tragedy of immense proportions, leaving an enduring legacy on the 20th century. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefields of Europe, shaping global politics, economics, and society. The war shattered illusions of progress and enlightenment. It revealed the dark side of human nature and the destructive power of nationalism and militarism. The First World War was a war that no one won. All sides suffered catastrophic losses, and the peace that followed was fragile and short-lived. The lessons of the First World War are as relevant today as they were a century ago. The importance of diplomacy, international cooperation, and the peaceful resolution of conflict cannot be overstated.